Unless you've been on a cleanse from social media, then you've probably heard of the Sex and the City reboot that's in the works, minus Kim Cattrall Samantha. It's been over 2 decades since Sex and the City took over our screens and our hearts. In many ways, it was so different from any series we had watched before. It was crude, funny, in some ways honest, and put single, strong, and independent women who support each other on a pedestal. But as time has gone on, although my memories of the series leave me feeling nostalgic, it's not as easy to watch today, with many aspects of it being cringy and just off. With the announcement of the Sex and the City remake, I thought I'd weigh in on the good, the bad, and the ugly that made one of the most iconic TV shows of all time. Sex and the City begins when the ladies are in their 30s and 40s, and none of them were interested in getting married. They were all happy with their jobs and had real, authentic female friendships. It was a breath of fresh air seeing women fulfilled and not necessarily yearning for marriage as a primary source of happiness. Most movies at the time would depict 30 as the doomed birthday if a woman hadn't yet settled down. But the girls from Sex and the City gave us the message that if you're not truly compatible and in love with your partner, there's no rush or pressure, and instead, there's hope that the right one will come along when the time is right. The women from Sex and the City were fun, free, and loved living their lives to the fullest. It reminded us that fulfillment can come from a variety of things, and that the picture-perfect traditional relationship isn't all you have to live for. The focus of the series was clearly the strong bond and friendship between the 4 women. Obviously, female friendship wasn't anything new to Hollywood, but never was it portrayed this way. These women had real conversations, were kind to one another, and supported each other in a genuine way. There was clearly love there. It seemed as though their friendship surpassed any other priority in their lives. So much so that some of their interactions were even unrealistic, as they always somehow found time for each other despite their very busy and very exciting lives. One thing I hope will be different in the Sex and the City reboot is definitely the lack of diversity, which in itself wasn't even realistic, seeing how they lived in one of the most diverse cities in the world, New York. This is definitely one aspect of the show that was completely incomprehensible. There were extremely few characters who weren't white. Samantha even dates a black record executive at one point, but their relationship is quickly blocked by his sister, who doesn't want him dating a white woman, and which unfortunately fueled the angry black woman myth. Another hiccup was the simplistic representation of gay men throughout the series. Although Sex and the City was at the time actually considered modern for openly portraying different sexual orientations, if you watch an episode today, you'll want to keep one eye closed because of how cringy it is. Basically, the gay community in the show was composed of 2 types of gay men, the fashion-obsessed one and the sharp and bitchy one. And both are flamboyant, of course. Carrie and Charlotte's best friends, Stanford and Anthony, who represent these caricatures, hate each other throughout the show, and nonetheless end up marrying each other because they couldn't have ever actually found any other gay men in New York City. We have all been heartbroken when we learned that Sarah Jessica Parker and Kim Cattrall actually didn't get along behind the scenes. But if you take a look back at the show's different storylines throughout the seasons, it's pretty blatant how bad the characters have it as well with Carrie Bradshaw. She is definitely one of the most entertaining and interesting heroines in the history of television. But let's not ignore how bad of a friend she actually was. As self-absorbed and narcissistic as she was, she went as far as to slut-shame Samantha, stopped speaking to Charlotte after she refused to lend her money, and instead of being there for Miranda when she wanted an abortion, she spent days wondering what her life would look like if she herself hadn't had an abortion over a decade earlier. Sex and the City is a series supposed to be based on female empowerment and, as I mentioned earlier, broadening women's paths to happiness in life. But Carrie and Mr. Big's dysfunctional love story represented the exact opposite of that message. The way they behaved should have never led them to end up together. Yet, they do in the show's devastating final episode. Despite Carrie's success and independence throughout the show, the vain and emotionally unavailable Mr. Big ends up rescuing her from another man in Paris. The cherry on the cake is the scene where Carrie sees Mr. Big building her the ultimate wardrobe, for which she will be eternally grateful. There isn't anything ultimately wrong with that, but to have it be the climax of the film that the wealthy husband built you a nice closet for your clothes isn't really what the show was about. It seems Sex and the City stood for women making their own choices and standing up for what they wanted, not settling for a never-ending toxic relationship in exchange for a closet. Now, despite the show's mishaps and disappointing ending, there's no doubt Sex and the City remains iconic. The four women were strong, independent, and funny, pushing boundaries and moving the female stereotypes forward. Let's just hope the reboot is worth all the hype, even without Samantha.